At the edge of the world, amidst the shifting sand, an army of monsters inhabit ancient antediluvian pyramids. Their cruel machinations threaten even those of other worlds, and only an immortal warrior stands a chance of defeating them. Immortal Redneck is a first-person shooter. It is primarily an arcade-style action game that combines fast-paced shooting combat with precision platforming and roguelike randomized level design. In the game, you play as the titular Immortal Redneck, some random schmo who was kidnapped by ancient aliens, mummified, and then dropped unceremoniously on a strange, otherworldly environment. Your intuited goal is to fight your way through 3 large labyrinthian pyramids and defeat the boss of each final level. Gameplay-wise, Immortal Redneck is built around a number of arcade-style combat challenges. Each time you enter a pyramid, you start at the lowest level, and must pick your way through various rooms in order to progress and find the elevator to the next level. Each time you enter a room, all the doors lock and enemies start spawning in. You have to defeat all of them in order to progress. Make your way to the final room and you will face a boss, which you will hopefully be able to defeat and complete the pyramid. Now, as mentioned before, the game has roguelike elements as well. Whenever you die, you respawn outside of the pyramid because you're immortal. However, the penalty that you pay is that all of the rooms inside the pyramid get randomized and shuffled around, which means you'll never face the same layout twice. On top of that, the rewards you get are randomized as well. As you explore the pyramid, you'll occasionally find treasure chests. Most of the time, these are filled with money, ammunition, or health packs. But you might also find new weapons in these chests, and more importantly, power-ups. Little bonuses that can allow you to do more damage, or move faster, or something special like seeing enemies through walls. Collecting a variety of powerful and exciting upgrades is a big part of the game's strategy, but these power-ups are also randomized, and you won't know what you get until you've already picked it up. Now, if fighting through a series of constantly changing rooms with waves of randomized monsters sounds a little daunting, don't worry, the game does have a progression system to make things a little easier for you. Killing enemies and opening chests will reward you with money. Then, the next time you're out of the pyramid, either because you won or more likely because you died, you can go to a merchant and purchase permanent upgrades for your character. Early on, you'll only be able to buy things like health or ammo upgrades, but later on, you'll be able to buy new starting loadouts, which will change the weapons you will enter the pyramid with and even provide you with new special abilities that you can use once inside. Once you've beaten a few levels, you'll even have the option of purchasing challenge perks, which will increase the difficulty in exchange for potentially greater rewards. Now, what's the good and bad of Immortal Redneck? Well, for starters, I really enjoyed the game's pacing. Like most games of this type, it has a very steep learning curve. At the beginning, you don't know what any of the weapons do, or what the levels are going to look like, or what the enemies are capable of, and you just have to jump in and start experimenting. But once you get the hang of it, you'll be surprised at how well the developers have adapted the roguelike elements for a first-person shooter. There's a great variety of enemies and environments. There's a great variety of weapons and power-ups. And because they're always changing, this puts pressure on you as the player. You can't just memorize layouts and enemy patterns, because they're always going to be different. You have to get good at improvising and adapting, which is something that most single-player first-person shooters don't require. I also think that the presentation is good overall. The levels, even being randomized, are typically well crafted with a mixture of corridors, open environments, and vertical areas as well. I also like the variety of enemies, and their colorful designs make them easy to distinguish at a distance. The only weakness, I'd say, is the game's sound design. As mentioned before, enemies will randomly spawn every time you enter a new room. Unfortunately, you won't always hear them moving around or attacking until it's too late, and I would have preferred more audio cues to let me know where new enemies are. But probably most important is the game's combat, and thankfully the shooting is tight. It's quick and responsive, just like you need it to be in an arcade-style action game like this. There's also a really good selection of weapons, everything from pistols and shotguns to sniper rifles, and even more esoteric equipment. And the game uses a rotating bonus system to incentivize you to try out different playstyles. This is one of the few shooters I've played where I actually felt encouraged to pick up new weapons instead of just sitting on the one gun that I already knew worked. However, as good as the game is, it does flounder in two areas, one minor and one major. The first minor drawback has to do with the game's power-up system. As mentioned before, whenever you encounter a power-up in the game, you won't know what it is until you pick it up. It might increase your attack, it might increase your defense, it might do something completely different, and most of the time, this is fine. It adds to the game's excitement by encouraging you to change your playstyle as you unlock new abilities. But there are also negative power-ups, power-ups that do the opposite of what a power-up should. Sometimes they're nothing and they just waste a power that you could have gotten. Other times they are deliberate penalties. Effects that will reduce your health or damage, or in the worst case scenario, actually get rid of power-ups and weapons that you've previously acquired. And these negative power-ups are frustrating because they are completely randomized. Again, you never know what you're going to get until you pick it up. And the wrong power-up at the wrong time can completely sabotage your current playthrough. The only way to avoid them is to avoid power-ups entirely, and that's not exactly an ideal situation, especially in a roguelike game where the emphasis should be on adaptation and experimentation. Now, as annoying as those negative power-ups might be, they're not guaranteed to ruin your enjoyment of the game. In fact, you might even be someone who enjoys the extra challenge that they provide. That being said, there is one thing that is guaranteed to ruin your enjoyment of the game, and that thing is platforming segments, or more specifically, it's actually the game's progression system in disguise. You see, Immortal Redneck's levels feature a number of rooms that are either multi-tiered areas, filled with floating platforms, or contain hazardous terrain, where the only way to navigate them safely is with precision platforming. And in the first 4 to 5 hours of the game, these rooms are absolutely miserable. The jumps are wide, the platforms are narrow, and most of the time you're being asked to make these acrobatic maneuvers while enemies are also shooting at you. Now, you do have a mantle ability, which allows you to grab onto ledges and pull yourself up, but this still isn't ideal, because you have to be looking at the ledge you're jumping to in order to use it, forcing you to divide your attention between the platform you're trying to jump to and the enemies who are trying to kill you. This situation is really frustrating, and there are a number of vertical rooms in the game that almost made me rage quit in exasperation. And yet, as mentioned before, this isn't really a problem with the game's platforming, this is actually a problem with the game's progression system. Because here's what happened. After about 4 to 5 hours of playing, I reached the midpoint of the game's upgrade tree and discovered that one of the permanent bonuses you can unlock is a double jump. And guess what? As soon as I purchased that upgrade, this whole platforming problem disappeared entirely. Being able to double jump is a huge upgrade for your mobility, and it makes a massive difference both in how you navigate the levels and in how you fight enemies. Honestly, the levels of Immortal Redneck feel like they were always designed with double jump in mind, and the game really doesn't come into its own until you have that ability. So, not having it at the start and then being forced to unlock it later is, in my opinion, one of the few flaws of the game, and honestly an oversight on the part of the developers. Still, in the end, I would give Immortal Redneck 3 out of 4 stars, and my recommendation. This game is a surprisingly strong mix of arcade action and roguelike elements, even if it does hide one of your most fundamental navigation abilities in the upgrade tree. I would definitely recommend this to anybody who's looking for a fast-paced action game or a single-player first-person shooter that has a lot of replayability, where you're constantly facing new challenges and where you're not just repeating the same tactics every time. Alright, well, thanks for sticking around and listening, and until next time, don't let any aliens probe you. Don't do it. You never know where those probes have been, and trust me, you probably don't want to. Alright, later. Ah yes, behold my secret technique, frog stopping. No amphibians will be able to challenge me ever again.